Hi, this is Peter Woolfolk speaking. Now, first of all, thank you so very much for listening to the podcast. Now, I am very excited to let you know that the podcast is now available on Amazon Alexa. You know the drill. Simply say, Alexa, play Public Relations Review Podcast, and she'll take it from there. And again, thank you for listening. And if you enjoy the program, please become a subscriber. Now, on to the podcast. Hello, this is Peter Woolfolk, producer and host of the Public Relations Review Podcast. When I conceived this program, my idea was to provide public relations practitioners with a wide variety of solid, useful information and guidance from public relations professionals across America. And we are doing that. I will continue to cover important topics such as crisis communications and artificial intelligence and other such important topics. But I will also address other issues such as diversity in public relations, marketing to women, public relations trends, various data concerns, and much more. From time to time, I will also invite vendors of public relations products on to help you better understand how these products can improve your efficiency and your effectiveness. You will learn a lot from our podcast, so thank you for listening, and please inform your colleagues about the Public Relations Review Podcast and continue listening. Thank you so very much.
Welcome. This is the Public Relations Review Podcast, a program to discuss the many facets of public relations with seasoned professionals, educators, authors, and others. Now, here is your host, Peter Woolfolk.
Welcome to the Public Relations Review Podcast and to our growing audience across America and around the world. Matt Charles Public Relations Strategies is a boutique consultancy with offices in Charlottesville, Virginia, and Chautauqua, New York. He works with corporations, startups, higher education institutions, nonprofits, governments, and others. Matt is a former spokesperson for the University of Virginia, where he gained experience in navigating crises and successfully engaging its many stakeholders. Years of on-the-ground work and case study teaching at top-tier graduate schools, including Purdue University, Georgetown University, and, of course, the University of Virginia, has strengthened his skills to influence stakeholder behavior, improve community relations, and aiding and maintaining a solid reputation for your organization. He is an accredited member of the Public Relations Society and also was appointed to the Fulbright Specialist Communications and Journalism roster. Now, Matt is a former New York City special investigator with tons of experience working under high-stakes pressure assignments. This is what brought him to my attention. So, Matt, welcome to the Public Relations Review Podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, Peter, and for making this a great resource available to all practitioners.
Well, look, let's start with, why don't you tell us exactly how the fact that you were a special investigator and how did you bring that in public relations together? And then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, it's an interesting story, Peter. Really what happened was my beat was Harlem and kind of went into the Bronx, so 110 North in Upper Manhattan, and had a dual crime scene. I was investigating a child fatality. I'll leave it at that. Really rough situation, tragic situation. And a news reporter from New York 1 was hit by a vehicle at while the investigation was going on. So we had basically dual crime scenes. One, the homicide, and then the second, the hit and run. So, very little resources available because we were just particularly stressed with deployments that day. And my supervisor was like, "Hey, I've watched you in court. You're pretty good. You went to UVA, and you're good with the interviews. So let's just do your best in dealing with media." And I guess I did a pretty good job.
So now, how long were you with, or were you a special investigator in New York?
So New York was 3 years, and then my wife and I moved to LA. She's in the entertainment industry, an actor, and also owns a production company working with youth and adults theater education. and she wanted to move to LA, and I think she thought she was going to have to twist my arm to do it. And that job, Peter, as you can imagine, working sex and drug crimes involving children, it can weigh on you emotionally after a while. And typically people would do, 1-2 year appointments, and generally and always, if they had a kid on the way or did have kids, they generally would stay away from that line of work. And what happened was, I was kind of a dinosaur at age 26 in that office. I just kept doing it because I didn't have kids yet. And, it was time for me to move on to something else. So very thankful for my experience in law enforcement. I think it lent me perspective that I, still utilize today. And, it definitely was a great experience for me.
So how did you make the transition then from law enforcement to public relations?
So out in LA, I started doing a lot of TV hosting, and the more I did it, the more I was asked to assist with, it's like anything else, resources are diminished or low in some cases. So I was asked to help out with some of the behind-the-scenes work, which would include the PR of, reaching out to, media organizations with news to try and get a show publicity, or to do the same thing with a product, like really helping position it with stakeholders, and just really fell in love with it. And then my wife and I have had our son on the way. This was about 11, 12 years ago, and decided to head back to Virginia. And we basically, the story on that she was sitting, I remember she was sitting in a trailer with, doing the show Las Vegas with James Caan and Josh Duhamel, and she's like, yeah, I've really made it. But at the same time, like, there's something missing, and she always wanted to work with at-risk youth and, providing them opportunities through theater and that line of work. So we had opportunity back in our hometown of Danville, Virginia, which was pretty economically depressed. They had lost a lot of tobacco jobs. Mills had closed down, manufacturing. There was a mass exodus. So I went back there. She was doing that work, and I was lucky enough. One of my mentors, this guy Carl Stauber, amazing guy in the field of philanthropy and nonprofit leader with Danville Regional Foundation, which was just founded at that point, with the mission of helping provide education, health and wellness, capacity, and education and economic development to the area. Said, hey, I've seen what you do. I think you'd be interesting to work with as a communications consultant. And then that led to me becoming the director of communications and PR there. So it was really cool to work with my hometown. As the years went on, had opportunity to go back to my alma mater. UVA called, so couldn't turn that down. And Melissa and I love Charlottesville, and it's a great place to raise our son. So first came here as director of media relations for the University of Virginia Darden School of Business, which was awesome work, great faculty members to work with, amazing communications team. We did work to support faculty with thought leadership, and eventually, some of the work we did helped position us number one in the rankings. And then after that, as there were a lot of issues and crises, not all of them at the fault of UVA, but just what we became involved with. And they had a position opening for a deputy spokesperson, which was an inaugural position. So I was lucky enough to get that about 5 years ago. So worked that. Within that realm, Community Relations and Freedom of Information Act fell under my purview, and then I've assisted the chief spokesperson with, crisis management, issues management, and from there, if he was out, I would be the acting spokesperson. So gained great experience there and learned a lot from him. Really good guy, great team over there. And then, unfortunately, my mom became ill about a year and a half. Well, she had been sick for a few years, and then about a year and a half ago, things went really south. And then the need was there for me to kind of help, lend some support to she and my dad. So I was in a position where I was already teaching online, so financially it was not a big deal for me to step away and focus on them. So did that. But as you can imagine, with the work I did at UVA, clients started calling. So, here I am today.
Well, that sounds like a great, interesting trip. And by the way, I've actually had that somewhat of the same experience. When I left Washington or moved Washington down here to Nashville, Tennessee. I came down as a vice president of communications for a small university here, so I can understand the wide variety of things that you're called on to do.
Yeah, knowing your background, Peter, I think we share some similar stories.
Well, I tell you, getting back to the law enforcement part of it, obviously most of the time we see spokespeople for, let's say, a police department, a law enforcement agency. Somebody's been up to something nefarious or something that they should not have been. What are some of the other challenging opportunities that police and law enforcement departments have or need for their spokespeople to be engaged in?
Well, I think it's a couple things. I mean, the overarching issue, and this is just coming from my experience in law enforcement, but also, working with the community. And then also, like, part of my job at UVA was assisting UVA's police department with, their spokesperson with messaging and engagement, that sort of thing, is just overall trust, making sure that the community, it's a two-way street. You need to trust the community and the community needs to trust you. And you can't just expect the community to trust you without you putting, as a department, police department, or law enforcement agency, putting that trust out there as well and working to gain that trust. And that could be anything as simple as, something I think we've gotten away from a bit and are hopefully getting back toward now is walking the beat as an officer. I felt really fortunate in New York to really, even though it was a pretty wide swath, I was out on the street every day. I wasn't in a car because, you could take the subway, but I just like walking around a lot and knowing people. And that definitely actually saved my life on at least 1 to 2 occasions I can think of off the top of my head, of just like knowing people and having that support and getting the heads up when I needed to, or receiving some immediate help is needed. So yeah, I would say trust is number 1. Number 2 is just increased engagement. Got to keep doing that. Because it all comes down to the fact of, if the trust isn't there, you're not going to have the relationships to help as police officers and law enforcement officials to help provide and ensure safety for our people and our residents, but also just making sure that trust is there to build those relationships.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's one of the things that I have heard briefly for police departments now. They need to do more, and some of them are, as you may call it, community engagement. As you said, being on the streets, meeting the people, because it has benefits that once that trust is there, information begins to flow to you guys rather than you're having to try to track it down.
Exactly. And I mean, you could even apply this to, like, the field of intelligence. It's always best to have, you have to vet the intelligence, but always good to have people that you can trust to provide information, and not just trying to get information just to help, solve a crime or prevent a crime, but also just info of, like, maybe somebody, a community or neighborhood's not necessarily trusting of certain officers or of because of behaviors that are maybe nefarious, as you stated. I mean, that isn't always the case, but it does happen on occasion, and it's good to know as a department overall to help protect the integrity of that department, or also just to, help bolster those relationships. And, as you stated, I mean, the momentum is there. I mean, we are seeing more community engagement, dedicated positions within police departments, and not just public information officers that just put out one-way information, but actually that function is there, but also the two-way engagement that, that we need to see put forth.
Now, did you or your departments ever have special activities that were geared up from time to time? Obviously, we see during the holiday season that police departments, they'll collect money so they can buy bikes or toys or other things for kids. But did you find your department doing similar sort of things, perhaps on a year-round basis?
Yeah, it was mostly year-round, Peter. I mean, Chesterfield County in Virginia, where I started out, they did a really good job, I thought, and also partnered with local EMS and fire departments. So that's a great way to leverage resources. They had great outreach there. And then my assignment was with Administration for Children's Services in New York City, and I liaised often with Special Victims Unit. And yeah, I mean, again, really good at getting out in the community. There's always going to be a couple of bad apples out there, like with any job, but overall, I thought I did a really good job and really care.
Did you find those particular skills, or obviously having been with in law enforcement, that you could transfer into, let's say, with the University of Virginia, or even dealing with some of your clients, how you could bring some of the things that you learned being a law enforcement person to their particular, help satisfy their particular needs?
Yeah, definitely, Peter. I mean, first of all, as you can imagine, in any job like that, that's serious, where there's life and death stakes, you gain a perspective on things. So let's say there is a crisis situation, which, it's from an individual's perspective, when they enter into what they perceive as a crisis, it's going to be absolutely horrible, mind-bending, and it's going to, instill fear in them. But as an external person coming in, being objective, you can really kind of keep your head straight, which you have to do in law enforcement on the streets, so that you stay safe and you can help others. You can utilize those skills to really trying to help take that person and pull them out, and objectively show, like, hey, here's what's really going on. Here's how we can approach this. It's going to be okay. Just take a deep breath, and we're going to get through this together.
Well, also now in working with the university's police department, were you able to help them in their approach to, let's call it, civic engagement?
Yeah, and I would say with them, the officer that they had dedicated to that job, that role, was already amazing with the civic engagement. I probably picked a thing or two up from him. I mean, I believe, like any job I have, I can always learn from others. But yeah, I definitely helped out with that. But the biggest thing was more of the media messaging, statements, that sort of thing, because that is something that police departments, and a lot of organizations deal with, is they don't have somebody dedicated that has that experience in key messaging, strategic communications, and those fields. But what I did was, you pair that messaging up and getting the word out with the stakeholder engagement that's in place with the community engagement function, and you can do a lot of really good work that way. And it's definitely something that I've helped other departments with to date that have reached out to me.
Now, you mentioned strategic communications, particularly for the police department or law enforcement. What sort of, talk a little bit about that, what that includes, and how you went about that.
Yeah, so it's like any sort of strategic communications plan that you're going to be utilizing. You got to start off with a situation analysis to figure out what's going on. And then always, any plan, you're going to ground it in whatever the mission and the business or the business, corporation, institutional, organizational objectives are, to really figure out what it is you're trying to accomplish. So figure out what the deal is, do an environmental scan, because there could be internal issues, there could be external issues, there could be like things you're not even thinking about from a systems theory perspective, like geopolitical, that something across the world could just impact you that you don't even see coming. But really trying to think outside of the box on that. And that formative research is going to involve, a SWOT analysis generally, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
Mm-hmm.
Try to do. I mean, if you have time, just a quick and dirty research project. If time is limited, speaking with people, a couple of interviews or just talks. If you got more time, focus groups. That's a qualitative tool that you can roll into a quantitative survey. And send that out to the community just to see where things really stand, and then you can triangulate your data through the focus groups and the survey to really get a firm grasp on how the engagement's looking, what the needs are, and where you can improve as an organization. I mean, I just cycled off a project with a municipality doing that, and part of it was modeled off of some of the police work. From there, that's going to help inform your SMART objectives, and this specific, measurable, attainable, reasonable, and time-bound objectives. You really want to quantify things so you know what you're getting into. And that also helps with evaluation, strategies, tactics that correspond with that. Budget may not be an issue as much, but you definitely have to timeline it and evaluate as you go along to see what's working and what's not. And again, if it's law enforcement, for example, if it's something with the neighborhood, it may just be, you calling around trying to figure things out. But if it's a city and you're really trying to get to the bottom of things, it could be a 6-month study. But at the same time, working with those officers to get them out with the people, talking with the people. Generally, and you're seeing this more now, where chiefs of police are really getting out and walking the beat.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a top-down message from the top-down approach. And you see a lot of chiefs where it's actually pretty easy for them they've just been so mired in the administrative process, in the latter parts of their career, just due to the necessity of the job with administration of justice within the department. But they're people that generally did walk the beat 20 to 30 years ago, 40 years ago in some cases. So it's pretty easy for them, and they really love it once they get back out. And the younger officers see it, and it's expected, and that really impacts organizational culture.
Well, in terms of making sure that they do it right, did you ever engage in media training for those officers? They may have been maybe district commanders or something along those lines, to make sure that they could handle dealing particularly with the television media, or I guess print as well, so that they could answer the questions that they wanted to answer, as well as get out the information they wanted to get out, rather than simply responding to whatever it was a reporter wanted.
Yeah, definitely, Peter. I mean, media training is crucial. It's important because, as we know, a poorly done media interview can really set you back as an organization or within whatever it is you're working on. So it could be a couple of ways you do it. If the timeline is super tight and you have to get somebody out there quickly, you basically just do a quick media prep where you run through questions that could be asked by the media, have those responses ready, figure out ways, if a reporter throws you off a bit or is trying to get you on another subject, bridge back. Mm-hmm. Bridging's a tool to get you back on the subject. Figuring out what it is, the key points you want to hit, keep it positive. And then at the end, I mean, it's always funny, people always ask, or media asks, is there anything else you want to add? I mean, I think you should always just say, no, that was great. I appreciate the opportunity for being here, because sometimes that can lead to like a whole diatribe or a road you don't want to go down. Mm-hmm. And if you have more time and budget, you could set up the half-day, full-day trainings with your public information officers, who generally will have training going into the job. That's typically how they got it. But sometimes you have law enforcement officers in smaller agencies that are kind of thrown into it or matriculate in larger agencies. But they'll generally, take and be involved with that. And then with your district commander, your watch commanders, your chief of police, definitely, captains, and if you have time, like get down to lieutenants and sergeants. But you really want to kind of figure out what the timeline is and the resources that are available for that.
Now, do you ever obviously advise them, because sometimes when you're having some sort of a press conference or something along those lines, particularly with cameras rolling, that once you are off camera does not mean that the microphone is off, to give them a heads up to be careful, not to just start running off at the mouth, so to speak, once they believe that everything is said and done. Yeah,
the hot mic dichotomy. I mean, sometimes it plays to your favor, but very rarely. Yeah, it's something where the hot mic is an issue, and I definitely advise on that. So just not to say anything, always be conscious of cameras as well being on, because you never know. Mm-hmm. And just keep it, I always think it's okay to be conversational and relaxed, to also put the reporters at ease, Mm-hmm. Ask them a couple of questions about them, how's their day going, that sort of thing. If you're the one being interviewed, just to kind of keep things easy going in and show you're a real human being, but don't get into what you're talking about until they actually start recording. And then definitely cease speaking about that once you're done with the interview. Mm-hmm. And leave it to the the PIO or the comms professional with you, if somebody is with you, to ask what that interview is going to be about, and then they can communicate to the interviewee what's going to be talked about. And that should have already happened anyway, so that they could prep for it.
Well, the other thing, too, is if you've got, let's say, a beat reporter, developing some relationships with them, because, working together obviously goes both ways. So I always try to establish a relationship with the reporters that covered us, because once you understand one another, I think things flow a lot easier.
Oh, yeah, and I'm sure you did this. You invite them along to tour things, to meet people, just to get to know the organization and getting to know the people is the most important thing, because it comes down to people and relationships and trust, mm-hmm. all at the end. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, like anything in life. So, yeah, you do that, and I highly believe that, let's say you have a breaking news situation, your top stakeholders for media are going to be your local reporters, be it TV, radio, definitely papers, and even your non-traditional, maybe like local bloggers, if you deem them credible. You need to give them a heads up first. And then if it's something huge, it'll trickle out to regional and national from there.
Mm-hmm. Well, Matt, you've given us an awful lot of information. And I'm just wondering, is there anything that we've missed that you think needs to be said?
Not at all. Just the main thing, Peter, is for people to remember that community engagement is vital. Trust is a two-way street, and relationships are what it all comes down to at the end of the day. And I appreciate this opportunity. You provide a great service for all of us as professionals. Well,
Matt, thank you so very, very much for joining the Public Relations Review. And I'd like, again, to thank the listeners for joining us. And again, please don't forget to join us for the very next edition of the Public Relations Review.
This podcast is produced by Communication Strategies, an award-winning public relations and public affairs firm headquartered in Nashville, Tennessee. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, this is Peter Woolfolk. First, let me say thank you so much for being a listener. Now, I want to alert you to our shiny new podcast website located at podpage.com. However, you can go directly to the podcast site located at publicrelationsreviewpodcast.com. There, you can contact me through email. You can leave a voice message. You can leave a review. You can read an episode blog and frequently learn about the podcast guests. You might also want to suggest podcast topic ideas or even suggest a guest. You can also let me know if you would like to receive our podcast listener logo that you can post on your social media. So I look forward to hearing from you about our new podcast website. Thank you so much for listening to the Public Relations Review podcast, and have a great day.